Welcome to another edition of Pulse Let's Talk, and this one is promising to be a very exciting one. I'm your host for the day, Miriam Mwende, and today we're discussing the Finance Bill 2022. I'm sure mmesikia all the things that are going on about it, the pros and cons, the people who are for it, against it. There are a lot of issues that have been raised. Kuna taxes, kuna prices inaenda up. This is all that we are going to be discussing today, and I'm joined by an expert panel of the National Deputy Chair of NAC Kenya, Mr. Kabala Kile is here with us. You might remember her from Miss President. She's a grassroots youth mobilizer in Narok, doing a lot of advocacy work. She's also a teacher. Her name is Nelly Chepkemoi. We have a corporate tax expert and currently tax partner at Kodi Africa LLP, Nancy Madhenge, and we are also joined live from a different time zone by a banker, community leader, and the KK Kenya Kwanza UDA chair for Minnesota chapter, Samuel Ireri. As we begin, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the Pulse studio and welcome to our audience. I'm sure you've seen various reactions to the finance bill, whether online or in person in your daily work. Could you set us off with what is the state of our nation in light of this finance bill? We can start with Mr. Kabala.
State of the nation?
Yeah.
This finance bill. This is just a punitive, to me, it's a punitive step that the government is taking. I think let's start by asking ourselves, what are the principles, what are the three cardinal principles of taxation? It has to be equitable, it has to be fair, it has to be simple. Simple to understand, fair across board, equitable across everyone who's paying. But what we see in this Finance Bill 2024, they're punitive, they are not dependable in the sense that when businessmen come into Kenya to invest, they cannot predict their gains or how business will be, or what the tax policy will be next year. This year, there's a reprieve in eco machinery. Next year, on a later eco levy. This year, there's an exemption from VAT for manufacturers. Next year, they're bringing the VAT back. So you see, in terms of predictability, it becomes very difficult for investors to come and invest in Kenya. You see, for example, our partners, in Tanzania, they have a 5-year tax policy. So ukienda kuinvest, in the next 5 years, VAT will be 16% for the next 5 years. In their midterm revenue strategy, they say that they're looking to reduce VAT to 13% by 2027. So this year we're hoping that maybe wataitoa ikwe 15, so that next year it's 14, 2027 it's 13. So look at it from the scope of an investor. So umeingia, last year there was no green bonds taxation. This year they've introduced it. You see.
Umetupeleka mbali sana. That is umetupeleka
hiyo ni kuonyesha how this guy is they I think they are not sure on what they're doing.
Okay.
And maybe there's some foreign influence in terms of people who are developing our policy, tax policies in my. To be seen. Yeah.
And I'm really glad that we also have tax experts on board. So Nancy, could you tell us what do you think is the state of the nation? Kabala ametupea a very political assessment.
Good afternoon. I think from looking at this finance bill, I feel the government is looking into ways to really collect money. And in big ways. So this finance bill has actually concentrated on increasing taxes, which of course, trickles down to the government budget, their spending, how much money they need because of the borrowings and the loans that have to be repaid. So the reason this particular bill feels punitive is because it has concentrated more on increasing the tax base and as well as raising taxes. So that makes it open to all of us, all citizens, you and I, and corporates, to seeing a huge impact in, the amount of taxes that we are paying.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that input. Nelly, grassroots, at least on Interact my youth.
Yeah.
What do you feel is the state of the nation after tumeona finance bill?
So according to me, what I would like first to start with is, because hata tukiongea hapa about tax policies, I'm sure some of the people listening to us wanashanga pia, what are you guys talking about? So maybe I will begin from the point where I might explain that come this time of the year, around June, it's quite a noisy season in the country because it's about money. So mali pesa hiko lazima kelele kukue, and currently that is what we are witnessing. And then now when you come back to, because we are talking about finance bill, this is the time now, the noisy season I'm talking about is the time for budgets. Now when it comes to the budget of the country, we look at it in two phases. You look at it at the revenue, that is where finance bill comes in, and then you also look at the budget now with the estimates that Nancy has talked about, the expenditures. So now with the state of the nation is that the youths, because Nikki, as I sit here, I speak for the youth voice as well. So the youth really feel the finance bill is insensitive because people are really struggling to make ends meet in this country, not just the youth alone. And now we saw last year the establishment and even the coming in of the Finance Act 2023. Na hiyo peke, it led to a loss of 70,000 jobs for Kenyans. So now because of that, we also have this insensitive new bill, that is Finance Bill 2024, and we are seeing an increase in more taxes. So as leaders, as youth, we feel like it's insensitive, and not everyone is happy about it, because if the last year one saw 70,000 people losing jobs because of it, then it worries you as to how much this will impact the kinds of losses we are about to experience.
I'm glad you've touched on that point, especially on jobs and what the impact will be on the corporate side of our country, for businesses, for even the youth, people who are formally employed, and even people who are doing their hustle in digital. All those things, we've seen them outlined in the finance bill. At this point, I invite our audience, please post a comment, post a question. We have an expert panel here who's ready to answer any of your questions, and also interact with us. Tell us unafeel aje wewe from the finance bill. What would you like itolewe? What would you like added? Maybe, could be. But as we go on in our discussion, we will be going to Mr. Ireri in a few minutes. But as there mali tuliachiwa na Nelly, what are the implications for job and foreign investment? Mr. Kabala, you had touched on it a bit na Nancy. Maybe break down what is the reality. Are we, venye wanasema ni kweli jobs will go, maybe companies will ship out. Is that really true? But
you mwana kampuni ya baiskeli imefunga. Juzi tu. Take it in Thika. You've seen even assurance, something assurance that insures most of the public vehicles. Direct assurance, so closing, you see. So, and the bill hasn't passed.
Yeah.
It's in discussion, not just it's when we're discussing. And they've started closing. So you can see the impact. When you come back even in the manufacturing sector, you see it employs almost around 400,000 Kenyans. With these taxations that are happening, we are foreseeing, as we also have an alternative budget. So we see, yeah, so we foresee a situation where 10% of them shall lose their jobs directly, and more indirectly. So in terms of employment, it's going to be dire. The dire consequences. The youth want to try turn again to create, the creative industry. You come up, you want to take photos, you go in town, you want to come and design. You want to. Now
at first we had believed that this government is for this industry. We are going to grow. We are going to get to a nice professional level. Is that changing?
No, that's changing, because Talanta Hela will die in the eyes of Ababu Namwamba, because he's the one who's accepting all this. How can you allow that you tax amateur sports? Jericho, as in people wanatoka kazini, wanaenda kwa social hall to practice boxing, pass time, at least health-wise, spending time instead of getting into crime, mnafanya sports. Then you come and say you're going to tax it as an income. So ukilipa membership to Jericho Boxing Club, ndio hiyo income unataxiwa. Unajua, you go and buy a camera, a microphone, unataka kuanza kuimba, unataka kurecord watu on the streets, wanakuambia per unit, we are taxing it at 200, 300. You get a smartphone, they've increased it. So what kind of employment, what kind of a government is not creating employment? The young people are being ingenious, creating their own self-employment. Then unakuja tena unasema no, we don't want you to do it. So in terms to us and to me, in terms of employment, they are killing the industry. And then you hear that the what's his name, Kuria, the chairman of the finance committee, anasema if you cannot pay these taxes as a manufacturer, toka nje, manufacture in a different place, then you import. So what is the thinking of these guys? We become net importers, nothing about manufacturing, just net importers. So and then you hear the president saying that we want to push the GDP to tax ratio from 14 to 22. But then they compare us to the first world countries. But when you come to accountability, okay, where are the services, where the health sector, suddenly we're being compared to Burundi. Sisi tuko third world. So the inconsistencies. So we have to resist it. We have to resist this bill.
Nancy, from the previous regime, we saw a lot of push for manufacturing, and we actually saw those industries coming up, especially in the eco space. Is it actually a reality that now these manufacturers who invested in our country, who created jobs, are feeling jittery and they're moving out?
So I think this particular finance bill has very far-reaching effects, especially on manufacturers. And the reason is that, whereas in previous finance bills, manufacturers were incentivized, there were so many incentives for manufacturers, it feels like the government is taking away those incentives and making it a bit more difficult now for manufacturers. So if we look at previous, just the recent, under the public participation, just the recent companies that have come up and threatened to shut down. We have Coca-Cola. Coke is one of the multinational. The raise in excise taxes, the eco levy. Of course, that will automatically affect them because the pricing goes up. And remember, for Coca-Cola, they're selling a luxury good. So I will walk away and decide I don't need this. So that, of course, impacts on their sales. When it comes to industries like, the telephone industry, which are also now going to be affected by, the eco tax, the excise, say data. Safaricom, and the data. Safaricom has come up and warned that, it's going to reduce their profits. So whereas we had encouraged the mobile transfers and Safaricom and, all the innovations, because Safaricom has come up with a lot of, internet innovations. And actually, we did celebrate Safaricom as being one of the large taxpayers. So what happens now, because once you introduce all these taxes and levies, I'm likely to decide I don't need to do any mobile banking. I'm going to keep my money under my mattress. So that means that they lose, revenues in that sector as opposed to increasing. So what we are seeing is the fact that increase in taxes doesn't necessarily translate to increase in revenue. So when we come again to the hustlers, so whereas we are trying to empower our youth, to be innovative, to start their own businesses, when you look at, businesses like taxi businesses, a lot of our youth have invested in that line. We've seen under Uber or with a motorbike and moved on because presence tax, which will see the rate go up to 6%. Already Uber and Bolt are threatening to leave Kenya. So where does that leave our youth? So that industry may die. Remember, these are people who've taken up loans. They're paying loans on cars and, so the 6% increment, and then there's an increment on financing, all financing,
Services,
VAT on financial services and excise duty. That now puts them in a corner where it becomes unsustainable for them.
Wow.
So,
Nelly, maybe you could add on to it, because you're also actively engaging with the youth at the grassroots. Are they feeling it? Are they already beginning to plan for those steps? Kama these companies are shipping out, have you seen any movement amongst the youth on what they could do next about it?
So currently the trend is, so you're either in that, because there was also this notion that the president was trying to push for the digital economy in the country. I happen to have been invited last year and this year, same as well, to face the committee in Parliament to present our submissions. And we tried telling them that there's a ripple effect on almost all these taxes. It's not even just about jobs. It's also about livelihoods as well. And I happened to present after the Bidco company, and they actually showed the committee with, for example, the 25 excise duty that is given to the oil manufacturers like them. They are going to actually, now for example, that liter of oil that you buy maybe at 350 shillings or 380, you're even now going to be paying more than 500 if that excise duty is affected. So apart from the jobs at it, you also look at how expensive life is going to get. If I may get to another tax, for example, the motor vehicle tax, they seem to claim that all vehicles are like it is a wealth tax. But then come to think of it, we have commercial vehicles, the matatus, and most of the youth or most of the populace use in the country. It's going to really affect that way, where the cost of business is going to increase. Number two, this is commercial vehicles offer job opportunities to mostly the youth. So watu kama akina conductors, the matatu drivers, even as an investor yourself for your matatu, it's going to affect you. You might end up pulling your vehicle out of the business. So the cost of business is going to increase. Jobs are going to be lost, and livelihoods is going to be expensive, because as you increase taxes on other essential items, then you're basically affecting the prices. So if it goes up, then it's even going to be unbearable to even live in Kenya.
Oh.
Yeah.
Awesome. At this moment, maybe we can go to Mr. Ireri. We haven't heard anything from him. Please tell us your comments. What do you have to say to the discussion so far?
All right, thank you very much, Mwende, and I do appreciate this opportunity to be able to come and participate in this discussion that's going on in our country. There's also a big segment that I think we've not been able to undertake, and that is the diaspora point of view too as well. But first and foremost, let me start by this quote by JFK. Once in a while, we need to ask ourselves, what is it that I can do for my country rather than what my country can do for me? This is a great debate. This is a great discussion. But I'm looking at it from the biggest mistake, or the biggest point that we've missed, is when it comes to public participation. And that public participation cannot happen if we don't have civil education, and especially when it comes to taxation. And the first and foremost thing is to ask, how are Kenyans informed when we come to the taxes that we pay, our tax brackets, what our responsibilities are for taxes, why do we need to raise taxes? Those are the key things that I think we have not taken our time to educate. The government should be able to do this for me. The government should be performing at this rate. We should be seeing state of the infrastructure to be here. Yet we ask ourselves, how do you pay for that? Are we supposed to keep borrowing out there and adding more debt to ourselves, living with debt and above our means all the time? Of course, there are things that the government needs to improve on. For example, how accountable is the government to the taxpayers? If you're collecting my taxes, what am I getting in return, right? One of the faults that I fault my Kenya Kwanza government, that I continue to support, that have supported, that I think they're on the right track, only that there are a few mishaps here and there. read. And looking at where we have reduced that to closer to 3% margin of improvement there. Are those steps that we've taken to go forward? There are also talking about companies thinking of leaving Kenya. There's a lot that goes into, I'm an entrepreneur, as much as I'm a banker, having worked in the banking industry for more than 20 years, I also have my own businesses. And part of the things that I look at, of course, taxation is key, but I also look at what other effects are there for my business. What advantages am I able to look at when I'm setting my business in a particular place? Things like, for example, the labor force. How educated is the labor force? If we look at the literacy rate for Kenya, according to World Bank, right now we're around 82.88%, call it 83%. Those are people of age 15 and above who really understand, can read and write simple sentences that are, affect their lives. So looking at that, how do we take advantage of that, and how are we able to bring that forth? So the key thing is first understanding the budget process, right? How is that budget process coined? How do we come about it, right? There are four main phases when it comes to the budget process, and the first one is, of course, the formulation process. When we're formulating this budget, the National Treasury, even at the county level, how involved is the public? Because the public seems to get involved closer to the end of the process, and that is on the approval part, which is the second stage of where now the finance bill has been brought forth. Now we want to all come in together and start participating in that, and that's where we fault the government, right? Without understanding how are these numbers made and how did we get here? So my key challenge, and especially to my government and to the president, I believe he does listen to Pulse, if I'm not wrong with that, is to look at how do we make sure the Kenyan populace is involved from the from the beginning of this process. And Parliament has a major role to it for them to be able to continue that. One of the key things I noted is I've been listening to a lot of shows regarding this conversation, but it's also very prudent. Actually, it's also very clear that majority of our legislators also do not even understand the whole process. They don't understand the finance bill. I know it's, roughly I was looking at it, it's 136 pages, 138 pages. So you have to read it. You have to reference to the Tax Act. You look at other things like the budget circulars and all that. Are they taking their time to continue to read and understand so they can be able to explain to their wananchi? For me, I look at it at this process, looking, I haven't lived here in the US for quite some time, looking at how do we get involved in it. We get involved at the ward level. So if my MCA cannot really articulate what the finance bill is, and then I can't just pick up one or two things out there, of course, I'm going to be tending to go with what the popular notion is out there in the media. And so, of course, on a personal level, myself, I do have some, opposition to some of the new taxes being introduced. And it's not about why they're being introduced. It's about how they've been introduced. Our key one is the motor vehicle, for example. Here in the States, we do pay what we call motor vehicle tabs every year. So we pay a tax basically every year according to the age of your motor vehicle, the depreciation value of that. Those factors are keyed in. And then how is that collected? How do we go about it? For example,
that we've seen, and this year I'm thinking it's even higher, though the report is not yet out. But in terms of public participation, Nelly, I'll come to you. What are the youth expecting? Because we saw a lot of activists there, and I think we can qualify that as they did their part. So what are we expecting after public participation?
Okay, so one thing I would like to really acknowledge is that this year we saw an increase of people engaging themselves in the public participation process. As to how and what we expect next is, it will determine how effective that public participation process was, because now as we see it, all eyes or all angles are towards parliament. So what the youth are expecting is that the people in the parliament should act independently because the process ended yesterday for public participation. Yeah. So moving forward, once the committee comes with the report to parliament, people are expecting that the MPs will be able to rise to the occasion and do what is necessary by representing people's views. Because also we've had instances where, you know, we've seen throughout the media and out here in the social media platforms that we have members of parliament who don't even read those documents. So this should send a message to them that people are aware and are watching them. So in whatever they do, they need to really rise to the occasion, seek that which needs to be amended on that bill, or rather, you know, exempted and deleted, and just act on people's concerns, because they are there to represent the people. They are there to make the laws of the day, but at the end of the day, as you make these laws, they must also be sensitive and humane. So what we are expecting is to see a parliament that is humane, a parliament that is sensitive to people's concern, and one that listens to people. Because is anyone even thinking about coming back to that house again as a parliamentarian, then this is the time to redeem themselves. Because if you go against them people, then woe unto you. Yeah.
Kabala, you're on the opposition side of this.
Me, I'm giving up on these people.
Can we be optimistic about the finance committee this time around?
These guys, this is a bunch of, I call them parliamentary content creators crew. On Friday ni kuangalia camera angle. How was I? Nilikuwa TikTok, ilikuwaje? But the Kenyan angle, I've given up on these people. These are people who will say, if you don't want to pay for a vehicle, don't use it. What if I don't want to pay for a house? You know, tukiamua sasa tuende the way they are thinking. If you don't want to pay our taxes, go and manufacture your cars somewhere else. So I don't think there's anything that will change from this bill. Maybe what I foresee for the motor vehicle one, finally, I don't think it's targeted for the private guys, because ukiangalia iko under income tax. I think they were finding a way wataingia matatu industry.
Yeah.
Na sasa wamecoin akili zetu tuka kwa private car owners versus public car owners. Unajua mimi kwani nikidrop mtoto wangu shule, what income am I earning? If I go to work, what income am I earning? So they created a division where now we all accepted that there'll be a tax, but we don't know which tax, or the amount of tax. The same way we'll find a housing levy last year. They capped it. Then once everyone accepted that tutakuwa na hiyo levy, then they removed the cap. So saizi what I foresee will happen is they'll say, okay, then for private vehicles hamtalipa, for school bus mtalipa, kwa sababu hiyo gari kiakishwa, hiyo ni income. Matatu ukiakisha, hiyo ni income. So the way they are viewing taxation, I think it's the way she's saying that they think the more you tax, the more you'll collect. South Africa, VAT is at 14%, but wanna collect around 22% to GDP. Rwanda hapa, VAT iko at 18, but they're only collecting 12%. So basically it's telling you, the more you tax people, the more people wanna find creative ways not to pay these taxes. So in the end, you had the commissioner saying that there are people who are buying vehicles and we don't know who they are, but we know the ones who are employed. So the ones who are employed will pay for these people who are not. You know, they are viewing Kenyans as enemies, employed Kenyans as enemies. Now they've come to content creators. You know, they've come for the youth. Ukona Uber. Look what is happening with the Mogoka industry. I think that's an industry where we're supposed to be talking about value addition. Let's talk about Jabba juice, or let's talk about Jabba tea. You know, if you're working overnight, you can take it to assist you. That's a business that you can start with less than 500 shillings and you grow. So how is the government viewing it? And this habit, Itabi, a national government, has gone percolated down to the county governments. Look at the double taxations. Let me give you an example here. Kama M-Pesa shop. M-Pesa shop, to open an M-Pesa shop in Nairobi, you pay a business license of 10,000, one line, Safaricom. Ukitaka Airtel, another 10,000. Ukitaka Paybill, another 10,000.
For the same business.
For the same business. In that building, let's say this building where we're in, the owner of this building pays fire license, and each and every floor has the hose. He divides this floor into 10 shops. Each of those M-Pesa shops will pay 4,500 for fire. Whole building has already paid fire. So you're again paying, this is double taxation. You've paid, the owner of the building has paid fire to the county. You who are sublet the same building, kuna fire hose, you've paid 4,500. Again, you've paid 1,500 for pest control. So the double taxation that the national government is employing has now come into, is trickling down to the counties. So now fikiria hiyo biashara where you're working with like an Uber business. Unajua M-Pesa utasema maybe huyu hata taxiwa na national government. Wewe Uber, you taxed your significant wameileta economic present tax. Changing from digital service tax was turnover around 1.5, so wameipandisha to 6%. So if you're earning 1,000, you can do the math. Now uchukue tena license ya parking in Nairobi. Unajua. So when you count and accumulate all these taxes, in the end, you realize that you're not working for yourself, you're working for the country. And I'd like to disagree with what a member said, that let them say, don't ask yourself what the country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Us, we've given our country everything. Now we're asking our country, what will you do for us? Because even this housing levy we are paying, we don't even know if we'll get houses. The Auditor General juzi amesema 800,000 Kenyans who are not registered in the Hustler Fund were given almost more than 540 million. How they were not registered. How did I get this money? I am registered. I have applied for this home. How sure am I I'll get this house?
Finally get it.
We've given them everything. What will they give us now? You see?
Let me bring in Nancy, who's a tax expert, and we can pick it up from those points that Kabala is raising. And I'll go to our comment section. We have a question from one Mr. Amos. Hello, please ask the panelists, what are the other options for government to raise funds? We are in a hard place financially given our debt standings. So is there an alternative? Because it seems the government is opting for only taxation. Are there other avenues that the government can generate revenue?
Yes. There is many other revenues. Granted that taxation is, the main source of revenue for government. However, I think revenues can also be raised if you come in and curb some like government spending where we are overspending, then we make a saving on that. If we curb corruption, because that is where a lot of the tax revenues leaks from. If we curb corruption, then we don't need to raise taxes because the funds can be put to the right use. I also think that the government can make revenue if they incentivize the public, to be able to, to be innovative. Currently, what we are seeing is that we are almost encouraging a hustler nation. However, we have a very educated population. A population where a youth is able to sit down and decide that I can make money from this or the other. If the government looks at bringing in incentives to enable them to create businesses and industries and to be able to save up, I think they'll be able to raise a lot more revenue even without having to increase a tax. I also feel that educating the legislators, the finance bill, without a thought process going through it. So it's important that, professionals or, the experts are involved in that process. Because then they will have looked, you'll have looked at it from all angles and you'll have seen the effects and whether or not it will raise the revenues. So yes, there's a lot of other ways that the government can raise, revenues for the country. Look at the diaspora. Without even having to tax. We make Kenya a good economic climate where we see tourists coming in. We raise revenues without anyone having.
when we come to developing the finance bill, who actually develops it? We've been discussing it all this time, but I'm sure there are some people watching at home who don't even know how the finance bill relates to the national budget reading, how expenditure, what, all those things. So can you comment on how the whole process goes, how the finance bill is developed, who develops it, where we come in for public participation? Is there some restructuring that can happen there?
I go.
Yeah.
Oh, I wanted just to continue that train of thought on taxation. So kuna hii saying mimi naendelea WhatsApp nasema, if you chase a butterfly itatoroka, but if you take tender for your garden ikuwe mzuri, the butterflies will come. Wewe tax wanakimbiza tutazitorosha. Au wabadilishe makili yao, watengenezee Kenya conducive environment for economy, it will come back. And the taxes will come back. Now, on your question, budget process, February, kuna na budget policy statement by the finance minister, which gets to parliament in April as budget estimates. This is a discussiva. So after the estimates, then it comes to budget and appropriations bill, which must be signed before June 30th, 31st, because that's what gives the government legal impetus to use consolidated fund kutoa pesa. Now, after that, 90 days after June 31st is when the finance bills will be passed, mid-September. It's interesting how we are discussing finance bill now, and end up passing September. We're not discussing the estimates, revenue estimates, and the budget appropriations. So where does participation come in? In February budget policy statement, it's usually top level consultative structure. When stakeholders or industries want to meet, they talk. The government puts down its policy, maybe if you want to raise the VAT for this year or know which sector they want to raise. Then each sectors, they participate internally and through stakeholders. Mostly it's not through the public at that level.
Yeah.
So when you come to the estimates, when Parliament is discussing, the Dinyoro's committee is the one that also continues with other stakeholders and broadens the discussion, brings in other committees, come a legal committee to see if there's a tax that's going to be changed, how will it affect the finance, and then before passing of that bill in June 31st, they're supposed to have a public participation with people.
For those 2 weeks that we saw. All right, that's a pretty good breakdown. Nelly, would you have anything to add?
I just wanted to answer the gentleman,
Amos.
Yeah, Amos, who asked about how government can raise other revenues. For me, I don't think we have a tax problem in the country, because people pay taxes, people have been paying taxes. And as Ireri says, we should be asking ourselves what we do for the country. Asking questions as to how your money is spent is also something you're doing for the country. So that's something we are also doing right now, and what Kenyans have been doing in this public participation process. So I would like to tell Amos that our problem is, as a country, we have a ballooning public sector and a shrinking private sector, because you cannot develop. Nancy said that the revenues in the country that we raise are the ones that develop a nation. So while we are being taxed more, we need to also see healthcare systems working. We don't want to see the education sector deteriorating if we are paying taxes, because as we're looking at it, the budgets in the education sector are being cut. Another thing is the industries. We can only collect more revenue if we enable a working environment within the industries or the working business environments. And lastly, what I wanted to say is that now, because I've talked of the how do I call it, the budgets as well, we've been made as a country to focus on one side. which is the finance bill. And when I started, that is why I started by explaining we are looking at the budget in two phases. So it has the finance bill, which is the revenues, one phase of the budget. And then number two, the estimates that we've been made not to really focus on. Because as government, or just this Thursday, they are going to be read about the budget estimates. So the country, we've been made to focus a lot on the finance bill and forget about the expenditure. And now the expenditure here is coming in with the government size. We can only raise more revenues. We can only see the impact of our monies at the ground level when the expenditure is reduced. And by expenditure, I mean the government size, because the government as increases, the expenditure increases. So what we are seeing is wastage in government, because currently people are struggling to make ends meet, but we are seeing opulence, display of opulence by the current regime and officials. They are busy buying designer clothes, they are busy buying luxury cars each and every day, but they're introducing motor vehicle tax that is going to affect ule wa chini, and because as they give us a capping of that 100,000 for the motor vehicles, they are calling it a wealth tax. For me, I think if it's a wealth tax, then let them tax their luxury vehicles, not the commercial vehicles that Kenyans are using. Yes, exactly.
All right, as we're coming to the end of our discussion, I'd like us to pick up from where Nelly has brought us. What next? If the bill passes into law as is, we've opposed it as much as possible. People have participated. But if come July 1st, we have the Finance Act 2024 as is, what are the next steps for Kenyans, other than accountability and all those other measures? Nancy, what are the next steps?
So first, perhaps just to comment, I doubt that that bill will pass as is. The reason being that this time that, a lot of experts, a lot of stakeholders have come up and given the implications. So it will be very ignorant of the legislators to pass that bill as is. It will be coming from a point of ignorance, because this bill, for the first time, affects myself and themselves as individuals, affects our country as the economy of our country,
down to the price of bread.
Absolutely. So it will be very ignorant for them to pass the bill as is. However, I would expect that even if they don't remove the proposals, they will consider tweaking the proposals and making it progressive, because Kenyans have not refused to pay taxes. All they are saying is that at least allow it to be progressive. Don't just come and take my whole chunk. So as it is, as we are seeing, only the motor vehicle tax and the SHIF, should those come in July, 5% of your salary is already off. Yeah, and that will affect all of us, including these legislators. So bringing it as a bill as is will be very ignorant, one. Secondly, because of having involved and from precedent what we saw last year, we've also become a very litigant nation. So we are likely to see the entire bill challenged in court, which will mean again another delay on either on the bill itself or on some sections of the bill. So the beauty is that Kenyans are also not taking it lying down. I believe the legislators have listened and have heard and will make the necessary adjustments. Just to make sure that when it is passed into an act, it will be as fair and as transparent as possible. We've also seen instances where, like last year when we had the housing levy and went through the stakeholder participation and everything, and yes, they listened, but the way it was passed was not transparent, because they ended up sneaking in other provisions like removing the cap, making it, reducing it to 1.5 and reducing the cap. And that is why then Kenyans were annoyed, because tax has to be transparent. It has to be, you have to make it easy for me to comply, and you have to be as transparent as possible for me to comply. So I feel there will be changes. It's a step in the right direction, having involved the stakeholder participation. It was an eye-opener. It has helped to involve stakeholders in the democratic process of making a decision on how they want their finance bill or their finance act to look. Yeah.
Kabalo umesema huna imani nao?
Kabisa ni koti. No, vile amesema ni koti. Koti ndio itaamua. Koti itaamua hii maneno yote because there's nothing there. The only good thing ni gani? Wameongeza chakula from benefits ya 48,000 to 60. Hiyo 48,000 ukiangalia ni 1,000 unakula a day. But sasa wameongeza ikakuwa watakuwa nakula 1,200. For them wameongeza per diem.
Yeah.
Per diem ambayo saizi capped at 2,000 hautaxiwi. Wanataka ku use 5%. So your MP sasa ile anaenda globetrotting kama ni 700,000, he'll get 35,000 a day tax free. Those are the good things ile wamefanya. Hao wamejiangalia. Wakikwambia ukaze mshipi au wanatumia Gucci, wewe una ile ya Masai. Unajua? Na ile ya Masai. Unakaza ni si nyote mnakaza mshipi, lakini nategemea unakaza mshipi design gani. So one hour tukua na nikotini. Hakuna kukubali. Two ni tunalala kwa nyumba zao. Because 1,000 transaction cost, basari inatumianga check. To transact 1,000 it cost around 392, so 400 shillings. So out of 10,000 kama ilikuwa inapeleka 10 kids to school, hapo already 4 watapelekwa because itaenda na charges.
Yeah.
Unajua kama ni muamue tena sawa basi kumekuwa kubaya tufanye donation, wamesema saizi donation of any kind is an income.
Yes.
So tuko na mchango sijui chama machama nini, umepata ngapi? Tunakuja yetu. Mkikataa wamesema nini? Wana repeal Data Protection Act. Wanaingia kwa simu, chama zimeingia. Mariam, kumbe una mama. Okay. Umelipa au hujalipa? They are coming for that. So one ni kwenda kotini. Two, tunaenda kwa nyumba zao. We have to, if they can't listen to us, then they'll have to see us every night they go to sleep, every morning they wake up. And lastly, number 3 itakuwa there's this proposal talk imekuwa around quality of public participation because hakuna bilia. How will you quantify that tumefanya enough ama appropriate ama equitable representative public participation? Is it because what they say is ati uweke kwa notice na upatie a number of days alafu within hiyo place unapeleka kama ni ward unafaa kuweka kwa chief ama kwa MC. How many people unajua saizi what decade are we in? Why are they taxing hizi digital markets na smartphones na nini? Si kama wanazitax realize that this is an era where people are tech savvy. Then why don't we have a platform where tunaweza kuja e-teams kila kitu school fees yote inaendea one platform? Why can't we then, can they also then have a platform where my views nitatuma either wanasema ni email lakini hatujui kama zitasomwa, unajua? So what we need to come up with, that's another thing that we're going to work on, coming up with a formula representative public participation ni nini. Unajua ni nini? Then from there at least now we can argue with them because watasema sisi tumefanya public participation, tuliita watu walikuja saa 30 si tumefanya, si tuliwaita mkukuja. But now we need to have a formula where we can argue out with them. For now it's them against us, ni hao ndio watasema si tutasikiza, you know. So sina imani now. Sina imani now.
Wow. Nelly, what next? In all this discussion, allow me to interrupt you, sorry for that.
Okay.
I've not heard a lot about the diapers, the sanitary wares, all those things, and a lot of these taxes that now weigh heavily on the women and also especially on the youth. For example, your diapers. So in your view, what next? If it passes, what next?
I think now I wanted to pick up from him where I started, but I can start with the one you've asked. About the eco levy, what us as We Care we did, we went to face the committee and told them that this is something inakuja affect environment. So sisi tuliwauliza to do away with the levy itself in its entirety. And give it some time until maybe the next finance bill process. then they should take Kenyans in the process to make Kenyans help shape it. Because Nani explained that these taxes mostly zinatokanga juu. You don't involve the Kenyans. You only come to involve Kenyans wakati ushaamua. So sisi tuliwauliza for them to do away with it first, give it some time to next year's finance bill process, and make Kenyans help shape it. Sio nini muamue ndo mukuje mtulete. Involve the Kenyans in coming up with it. Because as we talk of moving from, you know, conserving the environment, we have jobs sasa huku kwa the electronic vehicles and motorcycles, where you're now also increasing taxes, so it won't work. That is sisi tuliouliza to do away with it. So number one is to ask parliamentarians to do away with some of the clauses, and that is why Nancy is saying she sees an impact where some of the clauses will be amended, which that is a plus, because it would have shown that the impact of the public participation process was felt by that. Number two, ningependa kuambia vijana and even every Kenyan that parliamentarian works for you, so you have the power to summon them back and actually ask them why wali vote for that bill if it passes, and you had your own views for them to represent. So that's another one way. Number three, if they pass it, then we are likely to witness civil unrest. Tayari zishaanza. So that if that is not a wake-up call to parliament, then sijui ni gani itakuwa wake-up call. Because if they pass it, that means they would have been insensitive and not like, you know, they wouldn't have listened to us. So in return, people will speak. Constitution, number one principle in the Constitution, power of the people. So civil unrest. Number four and lastly, enye nilitaka kuongezea is we cannot relent, because if sasa watapitisha, then we would have seen what kind of leaders we have. And that is why also sisi tumeanzisha ile process of establishing integrity and transparency clubs in higher institutions. I'm speaking to that because as an educationist myself, that is a sector close to my heart. But we have in the budgets, you're putting a budget of close to 1 billion just for fencing the State House and the executive. But in the education sector, higher institutions, the universities, you're capping it at 22%. Even the special needs education, you're capping it by 20%. So how else do you want children of Kenya who live with disabilities that are using assistive devices? What are so much? We're actually killing sectors in this country. So if they pass it, then we have a chance now to have capable leaders now come up. Yes.
Awesome. We have a comment that has just come in from one Dennis. Funds for the housing levy were diverted to buy treasury bills and bonds. How can we trust that the government will use the new taxes prudently, e.g. the motor vehicle tax? That is the question on all of our minds. In a few minutes, maybe we can go to Mr. Ireri if he has some closing remarks from the discussions that we've had. But this has been really, really a nice discussion. Thank you, panelists. Yes, Mr. Sam.
Great. It's a great discussion. Just hearing what everybody has to say. In conclusion, for me, I have to talk about, and one is, who is government? Government is done in the right way, and we continue with the right policies, right? So we are looking at, for me, I'm very keen on civil education, and I'm challenging myself as part of member who supports KK government, as well as all the panelists out there and all activists out there. I think the key part here goes to who we put in office, and that is should be our starting point. Before we even come to discuss about the finance bill and all that, is who are we putting in office? Are these people actually going to fight for our rights? So when we go to civil education and understanding of what haki yangu ni nini, kura yangu na haki yangu ni gani, mimi kama Mkenya, kama niko na hiyo kura, nataka kwenda kupiga kura, ni nani ninaweka kwa ofisi? Maisha yangu yatakuwa vipi nikimchagua mtu fulani? So starting at that point, and then also looking at the whole process in terms of that civil education. We need people to understand what these taxes are. We need people to make sure that they understand the process and where you come in as a Kenyan. I'm actually very, very happy this time around on how the participation has come from the public and how people have been able to articulate their, the issues that are there within the tax bill, the finance bill. And actually, it gives me hope of where Kenya we are going. So the next question is, right now, what is the next thing that we need to do? Of course, I do agree with Nelly that these people work for us. These legislators work for us. So it's high time, and I'm actually calling upon each and every Kenyan. Unajua mheshimiwa wako, you know their PA or somebody who's connected to them. Call them, let them know vipengele gani kwa hiyo finance bill that you don't want. For me, from a diaspora standpoint, we have, for example, the taxing on the money exchanges. I know mpesa ikiendelea kuwa taxed, nikituma hiyo pesa to my aunt nyumbani, atahave kulipa tax na kwa hiyo pesa, so nitahave kuongezea pesa kidogo to accommodate that. So I'm understanding all that part, and I'm saying that yes, there are provisions in that tax finance bill that we need to put away. Kwanza zingoje kidogo kama vile Nelly amesema, but at the same time lazima tuangalie what environment are we creating for Kenya. We need infrastructure, but the biggest part is that accountability. Na kuna kitu inaitwa taxpayer morale. If the taxpayer morale goes down, we know then compliance is going away. So my government has to understand that fact that if there is no compliance, ile pesa yote tunataka kuchukua saa hizi from these taxes, we might not get it. Does that mean then come next fiscal year, when we're budgeting for that, are we going to increase taxes or not? And then we're still not going to realize those taxes. So for me, the key thing is, let's make sure that, yes, we tunasikiza watu wote. The government is understanding that. We have a quest from Kenya Kwanza government that we need to stabilize this economy. We need to be somewhere else, but we can't do that by ourselves. So I'm in agreement. And me saying that, ask yourself what you can do for your country and know what your country can do for you. It starts with that public participation. Watu wangapi wamekuja kuparticipate na for their voices to be heard. That is what you can do for your country. And that's what I'm asking. Do not, hata siku ya kupiga kura, vote. So what do you expect after that? So it is a challenge to all, especially the youth. And I'm so happy to see your panelists hapa. I can categorize wengi wao kama youth isipokuwa mimi hapa kidogo. But what can we do to encourage people to understand their mandate when it becomes to as voters in Kenya? And then our country will continue. We're all rooting for because of policies, but Kenya is what in Kenya. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Even on the side of government, everyone agrees it is punitive. Thank you so much, panelists. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your input. I'm sure kuna watu wawili watatu pale, they know a bit more about the finance bill because of you. I hope to see you after it has passed or has not passed.
wanasoma Thursday.
Yeah, Thursday.
Thursday to the final live.
This has been our show, Pulse Let's Talk, but the discussion does not end there. Yeah. Go to our YouTube, go to our Facebook, X, TikTok, comment, tell us what you think about the finance bill. We're looking forward to that budget reading so that we continue the conversation. I've been your host, Miriam Mwende. Thank you for being with us today. Bye.
Bye.